Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with my review of the new Puccini Turandot, featuring, let's see who it's featuring, Sandra Radvanovsky as Turandot the Ice Princess, Eunice Kaufmann as Kalaf, and Ermonella Jan as Liu. And let's see, Michele Pertusi as Timur, and then, Ping, Pang, and Pong, the usual suspects, and some other people. Oh, Michael Spires is the Emperor Altum. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, it's the Orchestra and Coro dell'Accademia Nazionale di Santa Cecilia, Roma, under Antonio Pappano on Warner. Now, there's going to be a tendency to, really value this simply because it's one of the first operatic studio recordings in like a billion years. And it's a major opera, and it hasn't been recorded all that often, actually. And it's up against some monumental competition. Absolutely monumental. And that's what makes this interesting. And in order to really appreciate where I'm coming from on this, I want you to all go over to ClassicsToday.com to look at the review of this by Bob Levine. And Bob Levine is our opera guy at Classics Today and at some other places as well. And he is possibly the greatest opera critic that ever lived. I mean this seriously. No one knows more about opera than he does. And voices and recordings. And he doesn't just know the studio things. He knows every pirate, every video. He lives and breathes opera. And his opinion is extremely valuable and incredibly knowledgeable. And he adored this, and I hated it. And that's really a very interesting fact. And we talked about it too. And the interesting thing, and I think what we need to keep in mind as an exercise in comparative criticism, is I'm going to tell you why I can't stand it. And then you can read why he loves it. And he wrote a very, very detailed and extremely intelligent review with which I have no quarrel. It's his opinion, and it's a very, very well-informed one, more informed than mine is. But we have different priorities when we listen to these things. And so let's go through it. And I'm going to make reference to some of the things he says, and you can go over and look at them yourself. And I really think you should, because this, I think, gives us something. We take it as a teaching moment in the value of good criticism. I'm assuming that my criticism is valuable criticism. I know his is. And so you can take it as you please. But the important thing is that you listen. We keep on listening and we form our own opinions. Why did I think this was dismal? First of all, let's talk about Sandra Radvanovsky as Turandot. I just think she has an ugly voice. Bob didn't mind that so much, and he's a real voice guy, because Turandot, the role, is written for a rather unsingably unpleasant soprano. The role itself is very difficult. It's high, it's screechy. She doesn't do anything till Act 2, and then she's squawking away. And one of the things this set has, which others do not, is the complete Franco Alfano completion of the opera. An extra 5 minutes or so of music, which allows more time, as Bob explains, for Turandot to transform into a genuinely feeling, human, thinking female woman. If you accept that. I don't. He does. I don't think anything's going to make her lovable. Anything at all. Certainly not Franco Alfano's dismal completion. Bob had less of an issue with that, and I can certainly understand that too. So, it's a question of balances. But my feeling about her voice is that it's just harsh, and her phrasing is kind of choppy. And for example, when you get to In Questa Regia, her big Act 2 number there, she's very good in the opening stages where she's narrating the death of Luo Ling and how she's going to be, get revenge forever and whatnot. She's got plenty of venom and sting in her voice. But when she gets to the big lyrical climax, she just doesn't ride the orchestra. And we have people who do. Birgit Nilsson, for example, twice, no less. Or Joan Sutherland in one of her greatest ever recordings. It's magnificent with excellent diction. Or even Maria Callas, who makes up for the fact that she sounds sort of like Maria Callas, with just unbelievable attention to word detail and phrasing and things like that. There are wonderful, wonderful performances of Turandot that show how I think the role should go that Radvanovsky does not. Bob is much more impressed with her handling of the text and what he regards as the emotion behind the words. And you may be too. I don't know. In the riddle scene, she's nicely vindictive. I agree. I mean, she's mean as hell, and that's sort of the point. And so that goes okay. It really does. But I find the extended completion to be gratuitous and unnecessary, and much of her singing before to be just kind of harsh and unpleasant. And I have to say, no one has yet done my completion of Turandot. My completion is really very simple. Because after the death of Liu, the crowd gets angry and kills Kalof and Turandot both, and they all go home and live happily ever after. It would be over in about a minute, and it would be just marvelous. You could sort of substitute the ending of Samson and Delilah, where he just hits a high note and everything, everyone screams and the whole thing comes crashing down. That would be a nice ending for Turandot, rather than this completely hopeless conclusion where nothing, I think, is going to turn Kalof into Turandot into attractive, believable people. Nothing. Anyway, so that's Radvanovsky. Next, we get to, let's see, who's this? Liu. Ermonella Jaho. Oh, she sounds old. Bob thinks it's good that she sounds old. I mean, again, it depends on how you look at it. You see, Liu is usually this sort of cute, kittenish young girl. She's one of Puccini's little girls who he liked to torture to death and who had to suffer for love. I mean, that was his pathology, and we hear it in Madame Butterfly, and we hear it in Manon, and we hear it in a whole bunch of the Sewer Angelica, sort of, kind of. I mean, that was Puccini's thing. I think she should sound young and girlish and innocent. This one does not. This one could be your average fishwife. She also has a mature voice. I don't think she floats the vocal lines in Signore Ascolta, her first aria, terribly well. She does sound absolutely wretched in the last act, when she's accusing Turandot of being cold and icy, and she's made up her mind to die for Kalof. There, I think, maybe the voice comes into its own, but until you get to that point, it's rough going. And so I'm not persuaded by her. I mean, when you consider that singers like Renato Tebaldi and Caballé, and, they did really beautiful versions of Leo. And never mind Barbara Hendricks, who's like a sex kitten for Carrion. Oh, she's gorgeous. You wonder why Kalof would even bother with Turandot when you could have, like, Liu. So, of course, that's not exactly Puccini's intention, so maybe that was a bit of miscasting. Who knows? But my point is that I just think the sheer singing could have been much more beautiful. And so, again, it's a question of whether you like the voices. Bob does. I don't. We both agreed that Jonas Kaufmann is the best thing on the disc. He is not an Italianate tenor. His Nessun Dorma could have more ring to it, I think. And, I want to point out one more thing. When I heard this both as a download and here, and on the download, for some reason, I do not understand, you only had the concert ending of Nessun Dorma. Ugh! It was awful, because obviously they're going to try and sell it as a separate track. So they must have recorded it. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, so here, he's pretty good. He's really pretty good. He's no Pavarotti. He's no Jussi Björling. He's no Franco Corelli. And so, Bob's claim that this is the Turandot for the 21st century, and it may be true, but I think it's kind of a sad truth when we have all of those Turandots for the 20th century that were absolutely fabulous and didn't have any of the weak links that I think this one has. Now, as to Pappano and the conducting and the orchestra, I am much more of an orchestra guy than Bob is. Bob likes voices. He can listen to, 1910 acoustical recordings and not give a damn what happens in the orchestra. I care. I care a lot. And this is, again, a very, very specific preference. And I think that Pappano's conducting, well, it's either very loud or very soft. The sonics are not perfect. We both agreed with that. They seem to have an issue with placing the voices properly, with the relationship between the voice and the orchestra. I find that there's a lot of orchestral detail missing. I mean, I'm a percussionist. You've got over an octave of tuned gongs in here. You don't hear them anywhere. You just don't. I mean, you don't hear a lot of the coloristic detail that Puccini builds into the orchestral part, even when it's very loud. I mean, even at the climax of Act 1, when he's screaming, Turandot, and he's got to hit the gong 3 times, that doesn't even come out well. I mean, in this recording. I'm not sure why. I really am not. But it seems to me that Pappano neglects a lot of opportunities to allow sort of the magic, the glitter of the score to really come forth. And it does not for me, as it does for Zubin Mehta or even Eric Leinsdorf, sort of, kind of. You know, I wanted more from it. And so that was an issue with me. So as a result, I will ping, pang, and pong, pong, pang, ping. They're fine. They're always fine. We never have to worry about them, do we? Actually, they're my favorite characters in the opera. My other alternative ending to Turandot is that Kalaf and Turandot go walking off into the sunset, and Ping Pang and Pong come forward and say, "Principessa, we quit," and they go home. And you end it with a sort of return to the commedia dell'arte aspects of the piece, which doesn't take the ending seriously at all. Because how can we? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, is it? So what I can only suggest in sum is that you look at Bob's review and you consider what I've had to say as well, if you care, and listen for yourself and make up your own mind. I'm very curious to see what you all think as well, because it just goes to show that there are two very, very different conclusions to be drawn from the same set of facts. And that's the point. That's the moral of this story. The moral of this story is that good criticism is based on musical facts which are indisputable, by and large. You know, Bob and I agree on most of the details of the performance, that Liu sounds mature. He likes it, I don't. That the Turandot, that Radvanovsky has her way of handling the text and her voice and whatnot that he likes and I don't. That Kaufmann is good, but not the most Italianate sounding tenor, and probably the best thing in the opera, and that there are issues with the sound that bother me much more than bother him. But the point of a good review, in my view, is that it describes facts accurately. What the critic makes of those facts, the conclusions they draw, is of course a matter of subjective opinion. It's your personal taste. And his taste is different from my taste. But we should all agree on the audible facts. And in this case, I think we do, but I think we draw very different conclusions from those facts. And that's what makes this such a fascinating thing to do, and why I love music and music criticism and hearing from you and your informed opinions. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.